Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another Land App webinar, today in partnership with the Farming and Wildlife Advisory Group and Defra. Today, we're talking all things future funding and really delighted to really bring this much needed conversation to our growing user base and wider partners. Before we get started, I just want to do a bit of housekeeping. So as per usual, the webinar is being recorded and it is a webinar, so your camera and microphone will remain off for the duration of the talk. However, that doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you. The Q&A function on Zoom is now live, so you can start to ask questions for our panelists. Plus, if we can't get through all the questions today, we will stay around for 5-10 minutes at the end where we like to invite people to come on and actually ask questions off mute. The session is being recorded, so it will be added to our YouTube channel. Depending on timings, it might go up today, probably on Monday. And we've actually got a feedback survey as usual at the end. The agenda has slightly shifted around based on what we did put out. But initially, I'm just going to do a bit of an update from Land App, so welcome and just what future webinars we've got coming. I'm then going to introduce the team that's on the call at the moment, both from FWAG, Defra, and the Land App team. After I've done the introductions from who's on the call, we are going to do a group Slido. So we really want to know who's on this webinar. It's been our most popular webinar for a number of years. So we're really excited to find out who's currently listening today. We're going to give a bit of an update from the different government schemes. So we've obviously got Defra on the call, but based on a lot of the comments we received, particularly on LinkedIn, we're also going to do a bit of a roundup of the state of play of Wales and Scotland as well. And so thank you to the various advisors I've rang around in the last 48 hours just to get a state of play at the moment. And then a predominant amount of time is going to be spent doing a round table. So we've got some experts on the call, so please do drop your questions into the Q&A. We've also luckily got some people behind the scenes that are going to help answer the questions as well, which I'll introduce in a moment. So please ask questions, but that's not to say we have all the answers. So any questions that we don't know the answers to, we will openly say we don't know, and we will endeavour to try and get as much information as we can back to everyone that's registered. Okay, so firstly, if you're new to the Land App webinar series, welcome. Thank you for joining. We try and run these at least monthly, if not more regularly, to keep you up to date with what's happening in the land sector. Some of those are more focused on the Land App as a tool itself. Others are more in the kind of discussion, thought leadership space. And this webinar today is very much in that latter. But if you want to catch up with any of the webinars that we've done previously, our YouTube channel is a great place to go. If you just search Land App on YouTube, you should be able to find our page. And that covers things like what is the Land App, how to use Land App Mobile, right the way through to countryside stewardship and other schemes as well. Just a little plug. So initially we were going to do a full Land App demo during the session, but the amount of questions that we've got and just great to have the right people on the call. We're actually not going to do much of a Land App demo today, but instead next Friday at midday, we're going to do an hour of demonstrating some of the tools that are discussed today. So that'll be a practical webinar where you can watch me and some of the team talk through some of our favorite tools, and you can register for that by going to the Land App website and going to the events page, or just simply searching Land App events. You should be able to find it. Types of tools that we're going to discuss during that webinar, just a little flavor. We've got some validators that are really useful for those people building plans and understanding where you may want to apply for funding. So things like the Countryside Stewardship Validator. Plus, we're also going to be announcing a couple of new tools, such as the new higher tier validator that we've just released, which hopefully picks up some obvious mistakes that you might be making, or helps you steer your design to make sure it's going to be compatible once that scheme opens. The second webinar I just want to quickly plug is the following Friday, which is Friday the 11th, exactly the same time. We're launching our Land App Mobile an update to the Land App Mobile, where we are releasing a whole new suite of features. You will now be able to, for example, take all of your Land App maps out into the field. We've got a whole new interface for smarter filtering, and we've also updated the ability to collaborate both online and offline. So we can have multiple people editing the same map at the same time in the field, And that's across all the different templates that we have. So whether you're doing a habitat assessment, you're looking at your ordnance survey data, whether you're doing a countryside stewardship, etc., etc. Okay, that's enough of the plugging. I'm now going to introduce our two main speakers today. So firstly, we are joined by Sarah Wells, who's a senior farm advisor at the Farming and Wildlife Advisory Group, who's come to join us, alongside Tom Lafford from Defra, who's in the land use framework and the environmental strategy team. Before I get them to come and say hello, I just also want to give a shout out to our Q&A function elves. We've been delighted. We've got two FWAG Southwest advisors in the Ollie and Lauren from FWAG Southwest, who are there to help answer as many questions as we can behind the scenes, alongside Rosie and Kathy from Land App, who are also going to be trying to help steer the roundtable. So we're expecting lots of questions. Please give them, and hopefully this will be a really positive conversation looking forward. So firstly, Sarah, do you want to come and introduce yourself quickly, where you're based, and a bit more about your role, if that's okay? And then before we come onto the round table.
Thanks, Dan. I don't think I can turn my video on. I think it's disabled at the moment. But hello, everyone. I'm a senior advisor with FWAG Southwest, based in Gloucestershire. Have been a farm advisor for 12 or so years now. And FWAG Southwest sits within the wider National FWAG Association. So we've been working with farmers for over 50 years, helping to deliver environmental benefits on farms, working alongside farm businesses. Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And it looks like the host has given your camera permission to say hello. And then Tom Lafford from Defra, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Thanks, Dan. So I'm Tom Lafford. I'm a civil servant in core Defra. I sit in the environment strategy bit of the department, so the bit of Defra that's responsible for the delivery of all of our statutory targets. My team also runs the underpinning sort of long-term delivery research and analysis that sits behind the design of ELM schemes. Are in a slightly strange scheme team in civil service terms, where we're set up to solve a problem, trying to get government to deliver policy more spatially, sort of trying to make ourselves redundant. It was a 3-month team, but we're now 3 years in because we haven't exactly solved it yet. We just published a consultation on land use change that closes on the 25th of April. So if you haven't seen that, please do ask some questions about it, well, as well if you've seen it, but hoping to convince everyone to reply to that in some form if you haven't already. Cheers, Dan.
Thank you. And I just wanted to make just a quick, I suppose, statement about what today is all about. We've obviously had a number of different turbulent decisions over the recent months from a whole manner of angles, whether it's the closure of the SFI scheme or things around the inheritance tax. So we are fully appreciating that farmers and land managers at the moment, particularly in England, but further afield, are feeling those impacts. But today is very much about looking forward. So we really want to use today's session to be positive, to have a conversation about equipping advisors, equipping farmers with shared knowledge to help the farming sector move forward, so we can hopefully navigate it with a bit of confidence. So really kind of a shout out to everyone here. We've got over 300 people on the call, which is great. We really want this to help cut through some of the noise and help focus on what really matters most, whether that is looking at the existing public schemes that are available. So delighted to have particularly Sarah, who's going to dive into some of those in a moment, about what options are currently available in England. I've got a couple of slides around Wales and Scotland as well in a moment, but really to start understanding about how you can start building a plan, because agnostic of where that money is coming from, money is there. We just need to help people get access to it, whether that's public funds or private funding, whether you're in Scotland or in England. We need people to have a plan so they understand where the future might go, but we don't have all the answers. So just to really reiterate, we are going to try and navigate today as best we can, but we're also going to be pragmatic when we just don't know. So hopefully that's made the statement. I don't know if anyone else wants to come in. So what I'm going to do is just then spend just 5 minutes just giving a bit of a status report on where we are. And hopefully you can still see my screen. But before we do, we wanted to find out, who's on the call. So I've not done this for a little while. There is a QR code on the screen. For those that's not used Slido before, you basically open up the camera on your mobile device. If you don't have the mobile device, you can go to slido.com and type in the reference key here. So we'll put it in the chat as well for you. And we will start asking you some particular questions about who you are. It should only take 5 minutes or so. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, she says, and hopefully you can start to see the results from our questions coming through. So at the moment, yeah, we're asking what best describes you. So we're looking just to see, we've got farmers on the call, are they land agents, are they advisors, facilitators? We've got some supermarket representatives, which is great, and some food processors as well. So we're going to spend about 30 seconds per question. There's only 5 questions in total, so we should be through this fairly quickly. But I'm going to give it another 30 seconds just for people to make sure they've logged in. I don't know, can I see? Oh yeah, 140 people have come through so far. So that's a good number. And let me just hide this because we were testing it earlier just to make sure you guys can see the results. So you zoom out, get slightly bigger. He says, okay, lots of people coming through. Great. So let's do that. Okay, so predominantly we've got advisors on the call, which is great. Those that are interacting with multiple farmers, helping multiple people hopefully get in. But also we've got a really good farmer contingent. So 20%, 22% of 190 people are farmers, which is perfect. Okay, just gonna wait for the final ones to come in. Thank you very much. What we're not representing at the moment. So we got some technology providers. Oh no, disappeared. No longer a technology provider apparently. Okay, perfect. So predominantly advisors with some farmers on the call. So if I hit this button, hopefully you can then say where you are in the UK. So we'd just love to know which region of the UK you're based. Are you based in the north of England, or you're in Scotland or Wales, just so we can get a sense of spread. Dominantly south of England. We've got some Midlands representative, minimal Wales and Scotland. That might be just due to the way that we marketed it. So I can understand that was predominantly a English focused thing, but we have got some Welsh people on the call, which is great. We have got a slide for you in particular, but also some of the future funding opportunities are very much Britain focus. No one is representing the Isle of Man or the Channel Islands at the moment. If you are, please do make yourself known. And 0% from Scotland as well. We can definitely, we're looking to just host some more webinars around Wales and Scotland as well. So yeah, very much happy for this to be predominantly England. Great, exactly 200 people have answered and it seems to be flattened off. 203. So yeah, mostly south of England. So Sarah and the FWAG SW team, that feels like many of your potential allies as well. Okay, just to keep it moving and go to the next one. Are you or your client's farm currently in an agri-environment scheme? If so, please tick all that apply. Did we include, I've just realized, did we include as a none? I didn't include a none. So if you aren't in one, I forgot to include that, or put, please don't answer if you're not in any. So if you're in an existing agri-environment scheme, what are you in? So mid-tier is definitely the strongest, but SFI you can see actually is joint competing at the moment. So a lot of, I think it was 37,000 farms are currently in SFI. So we've got a bit of a representation from that contingent. We've got some of the legacy HLS and ELS still on the call as well. People, I guess, rolling over. And again, I assume that the one Welsh person who's on the call, or the few Welsh people, Glassdeer and the Habitat Wales scheme as well. Perfect. Okay. Just going to wait for another 5 seconds, but yeah, SFI is clearly the most popular at the moment in terms of current applications. Thank you. Okay, next one. Are you currently receiving private money such as biodiversity net gain, nutrient neutrality, carbon payments for either you or your client's farming business? So there is an option for not at all, i.e. we're not receiving any, but just wanted to get a sense from the private sector of whether people are actually accessing funds at the moment or not. And just by the way, all these results are anonymous, I should have said, but we can share the results as part of a follow-up. So majority of people are not in a private sector scheme at the moment, with renewables, solar and wind being, I guess, a most popular of all the private options so far. That's really interesting to see. Just give it another couple of moments. I think, let me just double check. I think there's one more question after this, and then we will dive into the questions. And hopefully this has been useful to you to see who's on the chat, so the types of questions may be asked. Predominantly England, predominantly advisors with some farmers in, predominantly people not currently accessing private funding. Okay, and I think there's the final one, which is a word cloud, which means you've got free text to answer whatever, however you want to answer this yourself. But what blockers do you see to farmers accessing private money? And as soon as you type in the answer, you should hit done. The more popular that word comes up, the bigger it's going to appear on our word cloud. So why do you see private money being difficult, or what blockers do you see? Risk and knowledge coming out very much on the top. Nervousness, complicated. Liability, yeah, we do hear about where does the liability lie, high risk. Perfect. Clear advice and guidance. So yeah, particularly Tom, when it comes to the round table, these are the types of questions that we need clarity from government. You know, if people are unsure about where the liability lands or the stacking payments, this is the type of, I guess, questions that we're getting hit. And the more that, I guess, government can be seen as a catalyst to these types of things, I think that's where we're going to unlock a lot of value, hopefully, and mean that the public purse can go a bit further as well. Okay, so 156 of you have answered that. I'm just going to wait another 20 seconds or so, because this is one that takes a bit more time. It's not quite a multiple choice. And we will be sharing these answers because this is really good to see. But uncertainty, complexity, risk, knowledge gaps appear to be the most popular. We can obviously debrief and get our thesaurus out to see if there's any other common threads as well, because some people's wording might be slightly different. Okay. Right, there's 4 people still typing, so I'm just gonna wait for those 4 to come in. We don't want to lose that element. And yeah, like I said, we'll share this recording and also the data from this as well. So 2 people typing, 1 person typing. Knowledge is complex. Okay, thank you all so much. I'm just gonna pause that thing. I think that might actually stay open in the background, so you're welcome to keep answering it, but I'm going to move on with the slide deck. Okay, so just very quickly, I wanted to give a bit of a status report from the, I guess, Wales, Scotland and England, because LandApp does cover all 3 and we work with all 3. I know we've got Defra on this call, but we're looking forward to welcoming some Welsh and Scottish counterparts through another webinar. So I just want to list at the moment what appears to be the main elements for Wales in terms of if you're a farmer. So if you're a farmer on the call for Wales, I think there was 1 or 2 of you that voted. Just kind of key events are the Sustainable Farming Scheme has been at least announced in principle. It is the scheme that replaces Glass-Steer, and a proposed design for that scheme is now live. You can see what the design might look like, and we'll put the link in the chat. Glass-Steer ended at the end of 2023, and SFS, or the Sustainable Farming Scheme, is due to replace it in 2026. We're still unsure what that date is. However, I've been told by my friends at the Why and Usk Foundation this morning that we're awaiting some news. So news in summer 2025 is actually what that should say. Sorry, that's my typo, which will include how much your basic payment reduction percentages will look like as well. Just to shout out, Farming Connect is still there. So Farming Connect is for Welsh farmers, a free advisory service that's funded by the Welsh government to help you understand where you are at the moment and where you could go. That was what the Why and Usk, so Sian at the Why and Usk, thank you so much. That is the key top tip from this webinar. If you're a Welsh farmer and you're unsure, get in contact with the Farming Connect people. They can help signpost you to where grants might be, and it's all funded as well, but it can be limited, so it's not for everyone. You're not guaranteed getting accepted into that. It's just a bit of a statement, but it is worth giving it a go. There is a Habitat Wales scheme at the moment, which is the interim between the Glass-Steer and the Sustainable Farming Scheme. Must admit, there's not been a huge amount of clarity or uptake from what I can hear, but it is just meant to be a short-term placeholder. So if you're eligible, you should have been emailed, and it sounds like most people have been auto-enrolled unless they choose to opt out. But also just to highlight, there are some small grant schemes currently live around infrastructure and woodland if you're interested. So I'd say if you're taking one action away, if in doubt, message the Farming Connect team. Just updates from Scotland. So as of February this year, they have reopened applications for the Agri-Environment Climate Scheme. It's been the flagship scheme for a little while. It's open for applications, we think, until summer. So if you're wanting to get involved, please have a look on the Rural Payments Scotland website, which again, the links will be in the chat. And that's very similar to the English Countryside Stewardship Scheme, carbon, biodiversity, water quality, etc. Plus, there are, again, advisory services that you can lean on. So do go on the website. You can type in farming for a better climate, for example, in Google, and there are some options for you to get some support. A vast majority of it is offered for free, but there are also some paid advisory services, of course, as well. So that's Wales and Scotland. And then just very quickly, what we know from England, although I'm definitely not the expert here. We've got Sarah and Tom that will be asking questions. But as it stands, we now know that the capital grant scheme has been reopened for any of those existing applications that were kind of stuck on hold. So there's about 4,000 schemes that are now getting processed. And if you haven't already applied for that, it should reopen in the summer, although we've not been given a date. Similarly, Countryside Stewardship Higher Tier, the new scheme updates have been announced, and you can start planning your Countryside Stewardship Higher Tier. Applications, again, are invite only, and I'll come over to Sarah in a minute during the roundtable to give a bit more clarity on that. But it doesn't seem like it's available for everyone. There's certain eligibility requirements that allow you to get into Countryside Stewardship Higher Tier. And then obviously the kind of main one that's hit the news for the last couple of weeks is the Sustainable Farm Incentive 2024 was closed with immediate effect back in early March. There were 37,000 agreements in place, and 80% of the people on this call are already in an SFI scheme. So it seems like we've got that engaged group anyway. But just to make it really clear exactly what does that mean with SFI closure. So I'm just going to read the 5 kind of scenarios I think that will affect people. If you're already in an SFI agreement, nothing changes, i.e. you've got the agreement in place, you've got a 3-year offer, you do need to complete it, and that includes obviously your evidencing and your annual compliance. If you've been offered an agreement but haven't yet accepted, you need to accept it within 10 days. So just be aware, if you haven't accepted it, please make sure you're checking your inbox. If you submitted an application before the closed window, you will be offered an agreement providing the application is eligible. So you're still in a holding pattern, it would seem, although happy to be corrected by anyone on the call. If you started an SFI application, but you didn't hit the submit button, you will not be able to submit that application. So even if you've done all the planning and you didn't hit submit, you cannot at the moment apply for the SFI scheme. And then if you're in an SFI pilot, or you were in an SFI pilot, you will be able to apply for SFI when your pilot agreement ends. So those that have committed early on to help Defra design, it seems like, you're not going to be held, that's not going to be held against you. So I'm just going to take a pause. I don't know whether, Tom, there's anything that I've missed, or are those statements ringing true within Defra?
Yeah, more than ringing true. Those are factually correct, and I've heard those from the ministers repeatedly to officials in the department. I just add a couple of things looking forward. So, as you mentioned, Dan, details of the reformed scheme coming in the summer. Much like CS, we haven't set a specific date for that. And just to give you the working behind what I know is being experienced as a very unwelcome level of uncertainty, that is because we need to wait for the budgets to be set in the spending review. Defra is going through what's in the jargon a zero-based review of its spending, which means that every line of the Defra 9 billion-ish budget is being justified, and that includes the ELM allocation this year, which I think, don't quote me on this because I might be wrong, is 1.8 billion, so roughly so that's not hard maths, 20% of the Defra budget this year. So only once we've completed that spending review in June will we have the clarity on those schemes. So the balance of summer is after the spending review in June.
Thank you very much, Tom. So if there's any other questions for Tom or Sarah on that, please do pop in the chat. But like I said at the start, very much looking forward as much as possible. Great. So what we are now going to do is we've got just over half an hour to ask some questions to our panelists. So Sarah and Tom, we've had some already pre-provided, is that the right word? So we can at least get started. But yeah, the team behind the scenes are hopefully going to be answering your questions either live or be priming us to put it in the round table. And so I'm going to start with Tom, just because you're on there. So you've obviously mentioned there's some decisions to be made from the Treasury, but is there already kind of discussions internally about what the future considerations might include with an SFI? So it seems like it's not off the table. Are they looking to make it more simple, or is it just completely awaiting the results from the Treasury's review?
No, I mean, it's not completely open. I think it's really worth having a read of the Secretary of State's speech to the NFU for how quickly policy is shifting here and what that means for delivery. I think one, to stay a bit high level for a second and get a bit more specific, I think the kind of principles, if you like, that were set out for the next phase of iteration of ELM schemes are all under the umbrella of this farming roadmap in the jargon. Government likes different titles for everything. And there's kind of three components to that. There's the focus on yield and increased food security, split into improve productivity, improve profitability. Second, there's much more of a focus on farm business and food system resilience in there as well. So I think some of the things that were perhaps missing from SFI to date on direct support for actions that are going to increase resilience to extreme and more frequent drought and flooding as a more significant priority in scheme design. And then a greater focus on nature recovery. Many of our statutory targets that, when they were set a few years ago, looked reasonably far off, are now tomorrow in decision making in a business or policy delivery timescales. So we have to run up a ski ramp shape of delivery as a department, and that's going to affect the design of schemes. Dan, I don't want to talk for too long, so I'm going to leave that there and we'll come back to it.
Yeah, no, it's good to hear from Defra. Like, the direction's still there. It's not the end of the conversation. It's just like it's a bit of a reset happening about actually what are the priorities. Kind of talking about the here and the present then, Sarah. Obviously there was the countryside stewardship higher tier announcements that aren't quite open yet. Just wondering if you can, I suppose, give a bit of a broad update on what those announcements included, if there's any new options, for example, that people should look out for, but also who's eligible. Be keen to hear from you on that.
Okay. So yeah, in December there was a raft of information released by Defra about the higher tier scheme to enable people to have a look at that, some of the draft options, terms and conditions, things like that. So to be able to familiarise themselves with those and to really get a feel for whether that type of scheme might be appropriate on your farm or not. What they have said at the moment in terms of eligibility is that those that are coming out of HLS or already have been working with Natural England in terms of planning or how options might be implemented on the farm, those are going to be prioritised, and they're in this sort of the Natural England kind of pipeline for this year's higher tier applications. But alongside that, or slightly later, there has been that commitment that people will be able to give their expressions of interest about entering higher tier. So having those discussions early or trying to contact your local Natural England officer to express an interest could put you in stead then for when it's slightly opened up outside of that Natural England pipeline.
Okay, understood. So that those in ELS and HLS, is the option of rolling over your HLS being removed? Is that what's happening? Or is the kind of that rolling HLS annual perspective still available?
So most people, or I think everyone, because of the timeline of when the last kind of higher level stewardship agreements originally went live, will have been offered already a 5-year extension. So that will cover this period if people decided to go into it. So yeah, I think all those extensions will have already happened and gone ahead if people agreed to those.
Okay, so there's a number of people on here that potentially could apply for higher tier. And so you're saying getting a plan in place, at least understanding if you would be eligible to get people excited. What is on the higher tier stewardship that perhaps they don't know? I don't know. Is there any favorite options, for example, that are on there?
Yeah, so lots of similar options to what we've had before, but some of the new, or I think kind of most exciting ones that are coming up through are the agroforestry options. So there's for if you are farming in an area that's of higher sensitivity, so in a national landscape area, or looking to implement agroforestry at a higher density, so looking at over 20% canopy cover. Those are the type of agroforestry schemes that will be supported in higher tier. And quite a few different kind of water dependent natural flood management, naturalization of water body options, which you mentioned, Tom, about kind of resilience in terms of extreme weather events and how we're experiencing, some of the really challenging kind of wet winters and things. So I think some of those options could be really applicable where people find it increasing challenges next to watercourses and in floodplains. And so along with that, we haven't mentioned yet, there are capital grant plans open at the moment. So these are open to anyone to apply for and are open just throughout the year. There's no deadline on them. And these are plans that you are grant funded to enable you to explore some of these options. So that most of those are applied for through downloading the forms and sending to the RPA, but it is requiring, again, have a conversation with the Natural England officer to work up what it is you're interested in doing. But these could put you in a really good place then for, you'd be the priority next time then for, higher tier applications, or potentially just have you in a great stead for how you want to implement something on the farm that could be funded outside of a government scheme.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. If one of the FWAG advisors in the background could share some links to what Sarah's spoken about, particularly on how to get in contact with a Natural England officer, for example, would be really useful. I think I'd be amiss to highlight, so just as a note, if you are building a plan around wetlands, we've just recently released a free wetlandscapes tool. So any free users of Land App can run their farm using an SBI number to understand where their flooding might be happening and where intervention might be best placed. So a little play on that. And similarly, the agroforestry design toolkit, we can, I guess, suggest designs that are eligible, that meet the requirements of those higher tier options within the scheme. Tom, sorry, go on, Sarah.
I didn't cover woodlands at all in that answer, which obviously there could be quite a few people here with woodlands. So where people have got an existing woodland management plan, which is one of these capital grant plans that I mentioned previously, if you have an existing woodland management plan that's Forestry Commission approved, then you will be able to apply for higher tier woodland in this summer round. So, yeah.
Great. And Yeah, there's a number of different resources, but I think Sarah, you provided one quite useful one, which is just like a centralized Gov page showing all these different schemes at the moment that we can share around. Tom, I just want to come over to you then, just around both countryside stewardship and higher tier, and also the capital grants. Is there anything else that Sarah's not covered that you think would be worth raising to the group?
Just to go a bit broader for a second on the scale of ambition that kind of sits behind these schemes. So to meet just our statutory environment targets before we get to sort of the tree planting targets, species recovery targets in the environment, before you even get to our emissions reduction targets, we've got to plant 1 million hectares of woodland and agroforestry over the next 20 years, an area 4 to 5 times the size of Leicestershire. So the ambition and scale sitting behind these schemes is enormous, and I think one of the reasons the government decided to publish a land use framework this year. We're obviously consulting on it now. There's lots of detail in the consultation. Is I think that long-term certainty of policy intention, what the law actually means in practical terms, hopefully provides that additional layer of security in taking on these schemes now. To be a bit more specific, I think one of the important things in the redesign is the longer time frame. So there's going all the way out to 20 years because there's a real recognition in there that government has to de-risk these kind of changes.
Oh, there's so much going on, and I can imagine some of the farmers listening is like, it's great, we want to plant trees, but we also need to grow food. So it's great that agroforestry is being brought into that. And I think the bit that we're really keen to push, and I'm going to say we, the land sector, is that we need to make sure we're putting the right thing in the right place. This isn't a call to turn the most productive fields into woodland. This is a call to try and be pragmatic, to understand where you can de-risk your farming business, build resilience into your farming business, by incorporating things like nature, like trees, in the right place. And so just to shout out, and we did a really good case study with the Nature Friendly Farming Network and the Woodland Trust on our website, looking at about how you can increase your shade for your livestock with agroforestry. So there's different ways to look at it. This isn't about purely turfing up great farmland for nature. This is about us being a collective to try and build that resilience into the system. You know, we need to ensure there's enough shade and shelter for your livestock. We need to ensure that, you know, the wind chill, etc., is considered when you're planning. And that's the great thing about, you know, getting a plan in place, is you can start to understand the impact. We've obviously spoken a lot about higher tier. I just have a question here for Sarah from Alan. So Alan's currently in a mid-tier stewardship agreement that ends this year. Will he be able to carry over that stewardship or even transfer into an SFI?
As far as I know, and Tom, feel free to pick me up on this, but I don't think there's been any information for those where that's going to happen as far as we know. So there hasn't been any indication that those will be rolled over. So potentially it's a case of that coming to an end, and then hopefully in spring 26 applying for that new offer.
Okay,
there is information. I don't have it, but I will check after this. And if I find something additional to that, I'll give it to Dan so Landap can put it around.
Great. So we're just looking for clarity on what a mid-tier rollover looks like. Yeah. Okay. That seems good. Sarah, while I just look through the questions, you mentioned about getting paid to do a plan. Can you just elaborate on that? And what does that plan have to be used for? Are you getting tied in to have to apply for a government scheme, for example?
Okay. So there's a few different types of these capital grants plans. I believe the link's going to have been put in the chat for everyone to have a look at. So there are a couple that are specific, for example, a PA4 agroforestry plan. So that would be specifically targeted around how you might deliver agroforestry at a particular density that then might fit in with a paid government or SFI, new SFI scheme in the future or higher tier. There's also a feasibility study, which is a lot more open, could be used for a variety of different options. So potentially some of these making space for the river to move or water body type options. You need to have a focus really on what it is you're looking to try and you're interested in trying to achieve as part of it. But they in themselves do not mean that you then are bound to applying for a higher tier or other government schemes. So it's really an opportunity for people to look at in detail if something could work on their farm. Hopefully then if it's right, that will forge a pathway into higher tier. But if not, you know, potentially that's a really great piece of work that has been funded that could be a powerful tool for seeking out potential private funding. FWAG Southwest does quite a few of these feasibility studies, and we're starting to do quite a few of the agroforestry plans. And yeah, finding that they're really useful, sort of informative tool for people to look at.
Great. So I think, yeah, the call to action there is, you know, agnostic of where the money's coming from, there's funding to at least start to understand where your farm is going. What does it look like in 5 years, 20 years time? And then from that, you try and work out what scheme or fund might be best placed. I think I'd be amiss. I think it's a good time for me just to quickly put one slide on the screen, just to say, you know, those types of plans can help with other pots of money. So for example, we've got our friends from Waitrose on the call. If you're a Waitrose farmer, for example, we are supporting, it's £500,000 at the moment to help people on a net zero journey. So whether that's winter cover or hedgerows or buffer strips or infrastructure, there's funding available. There's landscape enterprise networks out there. So if you're in Yorkshire, Norfolk, or Leven in Scotland, again, there's funding that those plans could be, I guess, accessed, as well as some of these catchment partnership groups. So we're involved with the Irwell Catchment Partnership, for example, looking to mitigate phosphate. All of those plans that Sarah was talking about could be funded by these types of schemes as well. So if in doubt, please do get in touch. You know, it's just because things feel a bit uncertain with certain schemes. What is certain is everyone needs a plan. And so if that's like the big call to action is get a plan. And if you need support with it, there's people that can help, whether that's reaching out directly to FWAG or Defra, also support at thelandapp.com. We're happy to signpost people. Great. So just wanted to come back to a question here that was from Thomas. I think we put this on the slide already, but just to clarify, it was, will those of us in a pilot scheme for SFI have to wait until after the spending review in June to hear when we can apply? So obviously the statement said, if you're in a pilot, you can apply. Just Tom, do you have any clarity on that, or Sarah, whether how the people in a pilot at the moment will know when they can apply? No?
Nothing beyond what was in your slide, Dan.
Okay. So yeah, I think that's another bit of clarity that's needed, is just when they say you're in a pilot, they expect it to be reached out. Do you have to reach out to the RP? That'd be good. Okay. Just a question from Cicely. Good to have you on the call. Just any advice, probably to you, Sarah, any advice if you're planning a countryside stewardship higher tier that would be underpinned by some SFI options? Do you need to be resigned to these being mismatched with separate agreements starting months or more apart, i.e. aligning SFI existing agreements with future CS higher tier applications?
So within the higher tier scheme, there's the bulk of SFI options are actually within the higher tier in a slightly altered format. So most of those options that you would want to underpin the higher tier will be available. So within the same application, and will have the same kind of start date. There are some options that are not under that. That tends to be the things like nutrient management plan, the CSAM1 kind of soil management, pieces like that. But broadly, a lot of the options, SFI options, have been altered and or slightly amended and added in as part of that higher tier package.
Oh, okay. Hopefully, Sissy, that answers your question. But Yeah, I don't know there's ever going to be a function to align the dates for renewal, for example. I think they're going to be independently rolling, I assume. No question on
At the
that.
moment, that is
Yeah.
something sitting on a kind of agri-environment stakeholder group that comes up really regularly about the complexity of managing various agreements that have different start dates and things. So the RPA and people that we talk to within that stakeholder group are well aware of the sort of huge desire for people to be able to streamline agreements. But obviously at the moment, that's not something that's been able to happen, but that sort of need and desire from people, yeah, is kind of well known.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. And yeah, we'll share as much information as we can, but definitely some questions there. So probably a question for you, Tom. Got a question from Chris Hunter. So sand dune habitats were included in SFI, which was amazing, but the application process closed the day before we applied for the SFI. What is the next best funding resource for managing large landscapes of rare sand dunes? Is that in your wheelhouse?
It is not. I don't know, but I've written the question down. That's the best I can do, I'm afraid. Sorry, that's a bit too specific for me, unfortunately, but I'll pass it straight on to RPA and Farming Countryside Programme colleagues.
Yeah. Depending on where... Oh, go on, Sarah.
I was just going to say, if it's specialised in rare habitats, you know, that is something that higher tier is specifically there to try and support. So I would be, especially if you've got a significant area of that as well to be managing. So that would be my first thought of where to look at.
Alongside that, I suppose landscape recovery. I know we're working with the North Norfolk Coastal Group. I don't know where, Chris Hunter, you're based, but I think part of that is looking at some sand dune habitats as well, marsh. So I just whether there's an existing landscape recovery project in your area, Chris, that might be able to tie in your sand dunes. Again, I don't know exactly where you are, but that's another angle. So yeah, checking out Countryside Stewardship higher tier or asking a local advisor if there's a local landscape recovery project that you may be able to get involved with might be two fairly tangible outcomes for that. I think, Sarah, you touched on this already, but can you just repeat when will those who want to submit a Countryside Stewardship higher tier that don't have any existing HLS be able to apply or even have an expression of interest? Is there clarity on that date?
I think in December, when the information about higher tier was released, that spring was mentioned for that specific element. I'm afraid I don't know any more than that.
Okay, so Tom, I'm assuming unless you're jumping in, you don't know either. So there's not been a formal date announced by the sound of it, but we're expecting some form of expression of interest window to open for higher tier, although it sounds like it may be invite only based on certain landscapes or certain habitats. There's some nods there. Great. So it's not, just expectation management. Not everyone will be eligible for stewardship. It is higher tier stewardship. Sorry, it is not for everyone, but hopefully as many of you as possible will be able to at least do some form of expression. But just to reiterate, build a plan, understand what you want, because then you at least have got something tangible of what you may be able to deliver under that or others. A kind of a signposting question that maybe FWAG you can help with is just who would you say is best to talk to about private money, i.e. they've got a particular interest in renewable energy and they're wanting to talk about wind and solar. Where would you signpost people about that?
So I would say if there's I know, for example, in Gloucestershire there's specific organisation that's been set up linked to the county council about, say, community energy. So that would be one example. I don't know if that's set up in other kind of local authority areas, but that would be one route to specifically look at.
Yeah. And just to kind of give a little teaser about where LandApp's headspace is at the moment, behind the scenes, we've actually introduced the ability to set the status of a plan to seeking funding. So agnostic to where you are in the country, you'll be able to say any of your plans, Stewardship, SFI, UK HAB, etc., are seeking funding, and we will be able to start processing that geospatial data and at least signposting you to people that may be able to help. So just that's going to be, I'm not sure if I'm going to announce it next Friday, but for those of you here, just again, a call to action, just start doodling on a map roughly where you want to do something interesting, and hopefully tools like LandApp will be able to start to help automatically sending you to the right people, but you cannot replace a local advisor. Agnostic of what every tool says, speaking to a local person who knows the local area is a way better, longer term strategy. But getting it on a map so you can at least have that unnuanced conversation is always a good place. And then when we do release some extra functionality, hopefully you're all ready to go. So a question, but I don't know who actually to, probably Tom to start with, but maybe Sarah, because you raised it, is just point from Sophie is just that they've been told by Natural England that they're no longer processing PA1s for the moment. They're just wondering how long the turnaround time is. As we've been advised, it may be better for the client to continue with the survey themselves. Is this news to you, Sarah? Or do you know if Natural England's currently processing PA1s?
Not PA1 specifically. I know the PA4 agroforestry plans are getting turned around extremely quickly. I think with some of the plans, depending what it is people are wanting to look at as part of it, some of the kind of design or the specifics of what would need to be included in the plan are still trying to be worked up by Natural England. For example, I know if people are interested in applying for the species rich floodplain option, that's something that at the moment is in development. If you want to look at that, what actually the criteria would need to cover for a PA2 feasibility study. So it is a little bit that some of these things appear to be trying to be worked up alongside already being available. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's a bit of a common thread, which is we're still trying to find our feet. We don't have definitive answers, but get it through. There's also a comment from Tom Harrison who has said that the PA1 and the PA2 funding process is quite slow. So I guess there's a bit of a common thread on maybe a bit of clarity around those different applications, but a good shout out to the PA4 for the agroforestry at least. That's the sounds like it's not quite hitting capacity yet. So if you're interested in agroforestry, that seems like a nice action.
The agroforestry and the also woodland management plans are very clearly kind of set out and all formulated. So those are the ones that are probably going through much more quickly at the moment.
Okay. I'm just going to step away from stewardship for the moment because there's quite a few other questions that hopefully we could give a bit of a broader image. So question for Tom. Do we know of any landscape recovery projects that have got implementation and funding secured either via Defra or the RPA, or are all these landscape recovery projects not yet, I suppose, funded? Is that something that there's any announcement on? It's to you, Tom. Sorry.
So forthcoming landscape recovery projects that are not yet funded, so that people on the line can think about joining those projects. Is that the question?
I think it's slightly more broad. I think existing landscape recovery projects, are there some good news stories basically from the landscape recovery project initiatives that may have already passed?
Well, from the 55 existing landscape recovery projects, yes, where do you start? They're fantastic. Almost all demonstrating opportunities to both extend them in scale and scope. Yeah.
Lots of good ones. Yeah, it was a bit of a leading question. I think sometimes Defra, you need to celebrate the good things as well. And I think landscape recovery projects, the ones we're working with, we're very fortunate to be involved in a lot of them from a mapping level and also a bit of a consultancy supporting the data level. There's some really good news stories out there. So do Google them. I think, Sarah, you mentioned during our conversation yesterday, for example, the Northeast Farmer Cotswold Farm Cluster, for example, that have been working with Network Rail. Some really nice stories that are coming out from that. And yeah, very much worth reading about them if you're interested. Sarah, I'm not sure if you want to add to that or.
Yeah, just I suppose picking up on the specific of the question about whether it's Defra funding or private funding. I know the proposal that was put forward by the Northeast Cotswolds Farmer Cluster as part of their landscape recovery, how to actually take it forward into delivery. In the proposal included sort of a blended finance model between both elements of Defra and kind of that private support. I cannot claim to understand fully that model. It's very complicated, but they are kind of looking at both angles of that, or how government could back up that private support. So yeah,
Right.
I'm sure that is available on their website to look at in more detail, like you say, Dan.
Perfect. So we've got just about 5 minutes left. There is still tens of questions. So I'm going to limit answers to 1 or 2 sentences maximum. Let's see how many we can get through, but we will try and follow up. So, Tom, where do you see grant funding in 20 years' time? Tough question for 1 sentence. That's from Sarah.
The only, I mean, I'm a civil servant. The only I can't just follow a logical chain. The only answer I can give to that is that we won't know until after the spending review. The 1 sentence, like more substantive response to that is we have to transform agricultural land use on close to 2 million hectares of England's agricultural land out into the 2040s. And grant funding, particularly with the ability to stack on top of that, will be key to that. There's no way to think around that.
Yeah. I think, yeah, from our perspective, it's resilient landscapes, lower bottom lines and, private funding stitched in on stacked payments. Just a question, when will machine grant schemes be open? Any news on machine grant schemes? Question from John.
Farming Equipment and Technology Fund opens in spring. That was as of the end of February, the announcement that was made. Slightly to be kind of probably more high-tech type options and more limited than what it was in the past.
Yeah. And related one from Julian, slurry infrastructure grants, they're currently open at the moment? Or...
as part of that grant scheme, there is funding for, slurry, sort of improved management of slurry as part of that. I'm not entirely sure if that's open currently or will open again in the spring.
Yeah. Okay. Gosh, there's so many questions. Question for Tom. Will the agroforestry options be open in less sensitive areas via SFI in 25, 26? I think there's a question about the density of higher tier versus the SFI density. Is that still an unknown until Treasury type response?
No, it may not be. I just don't know, I think. I've written it down.
Yep. Okay. Gosh, there's so many. If Natural England don't want to use SFI equivalents in applications, is there what other routes would there be for people that have got SFI type application plans ready that perhaps aren't going into SFI at the moment? Can you signpost people to where certain SFI type actions can be funded? I think it's a question from Anna. What did you use, Sarah, to start with? If someone's got an SFI plan now, but they haven't applied, what do you do with it?
I think that's probably the most challenging question at the moment, where it's not kind of that higher level, longer term, real bigger habitat creation that would be under higher tier. Yeah, where to go? Look at what might be available locally. So if there's a water company that may be funding sort of legume fallows or cover crops, things like that. Farming in protected landscapes, if you're in a national landscape area, I think it's having to bring that down and look at opportunities locally.
Thanks. And yeah, I put the 3 that we're working on the screen as well. So just there are things out there. If you're a Waitrose farmer, get in touch. There is support there already. We just need to know who you are and where you are. Landscape Enterprise Networks is really picking up speed, and these water company pots that are open. I know Severn Trent, Anglian Water as well are open to applications from farmers for things like cover crops, as is Southern Water as well. Okay, so we've definitely finished in terms of time. There are another 20 questions we could go. So what I will say is, if you need to leave, please do. Thank you so much for your attendance. Support at thelandapp.com is here to help. So if you've got any questions, you're unsure, you need signposting, please get in touch. We will be doing some follow-up notes and the recording, and please answer the survey when you leave. But for those that have got an extra 5 minutes, providing Tom and Sarah, you're happy, are you okay for another 5 minutes just to go through a couple of these questions? There's some unenthusiastic nods. I apologize, appreciate it. But yeah, just to kind of talk through some of these other schemes. So there's a kind of a general trend around like biodiversity net gain. I guess what legs has biodiversity net gain got? And obviously we're hearing stories of more and more getting registered. So I guess, Tom, over to you to start with. Where do you see that playing in the next 2-5 years if you're the average farmer?
Yeah, I'll start with a bit of like self-criticism that ministers are really aware of. Like there is a need for a radical simplification of stacking with biodiversity net gain, nutrient credits, as well as the coming nature restoration fund, create the kind of environmental headroom for big infrastructure and housing expansion. I think hopefully the guidance on the ability to stack actions funded through environmental land management schemes with BNG is relatively clear. Dan, I'm sure that you guys have a great way of pointing to that through your tool, but so the principle of additionality isn't quite good enough for simplifying those choices now that the landscape of stackable compliance markets is getting super complex. Government is really aware of that. Ministers want to sort it out quickly.
Yeah, and I suppose those types I think you would like to hear from people through the land use framework on those types of threads. So just another shout out for Tom's work is there is a great consultation out at the moment that closes on the 25th of April, I think. So just it's a perfect time to have your say. You don't need to answer everything. If you're not an expert in certain things, don't worry, just skip it into the next question that you understand. And yeah, there's some really good stuff in there. An interesting one that I'm interested to know is there any prospect of a joint landlord tenant scheme to enable greater collaboration between tenants? And this is Ben Garstang, such as the landlord takes on the capital elements and the tenant delivers the management, for example. I don't know if that's on the roadmap, Tom.
And please do put any ideas you have on that straight into the consultation that Dan just flagged. Thanks for that, Dan. Yeah, so that's exactly the kind of discussion we've been having with the Defra Secretary of State had the country's largest landowners around a table talking about designing exactly that last week. So yeah, to be confirmed. I can't say anything specific, but your question defines the problem well, and we're working on it.
Oh, great. And we're doing some nice work with some certain estates, trying to work it out. There's definitely an appetite from landowners to work better with their tenants. Just at the moment, it feels a bit too disjointed and bureaucratic to be able to make it actually work. So yeah, Ben and anyone else here from an estate, if you're a tenant or a landlord or a landowner, please do fill in the land use consultation. Do give your 2 cents. Gosh, there's so many more. I guess, Tom, is there any more of an update about what happens with the 50 new ELMS actions and payments that were announced in January 2024, particularly the payments related to permissive and public access? Sarah looks like she's potentially got an answer for that.
There are a number of permissive access options available under the higher tier, and sort of improvements to public access for other users as well. So I know that they're included under the draft higher tier actions.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So what I'm tempted to do is there's probably lots of other things we could talk about, but I'm just going to ask both the panelists just a kind of general question, which is just more around best use of time right now. So firstly, Sarah, if a farmer has limited time, limited resources, what is the one action that they should prioritize right now if they are preparing for, I guess, the future of funding?
I think trying to ensure you've got clear vision for your farm, where it is you're headed to 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, in order to make ensure you're improving your resilience, both to kind of financial and market things that are happening in the world, but also climate change. So I think being clear on your vision will then help other things then to be identified as things start to become available again, or opportunities arise.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. And then last question for Tom is kind of looking forward into the future policy. I guess what's most exciting from your perspective about what's on the horizon for land management for farmers, and I guess how Defra and the wider government interacts with them?
Three things. The cracking open of government data so that you have clarity on things like grid capacity, demand for agri-solar, offshore wind, battery storage. So you can think about understanding those like deeper, harder options to diversify your business and stack income streams. Second, far more long-termism. Government saying this is what we're doing now, this is how long a scheme lasts, and here's where we expect to be region by region in a decade, 2 decades time. Secretary of State wants to be quite radical about that and do that in a way that is spatial. And then finally, the intention to radically simplify the way you access information from Defra, the way you access funds. There is I think, Dan, this may be your branding, we're certainly using it internally. The need to make land digital so that we can get to that radical simplification quickly is the campaign of this group of ministers.
Right. And that's a perfect note to end on. So yeah, actually just picking up on that, we are shortly going to be kind of launching a cross-sector partnership under that Making Land Digital banner. You will all hopefully hear about it very soon, but it's just some practical steps that we believe that Defra can take to support farmers, to support advisors in making the system a bit more streamlined. And it is looking at the Making Tax Digital system that happens in 2019 as just a nice exemplar of how it can happen. There is some links that will be shared to everyone, and we're included in the follow-up and probably touch on it in the cover some coming webinars. Thank you so much. I just want to say thank you to Tom and Sarah for all of your answers and to the diversity of questions, but also Ollie and Lauren from FWAG Southwest, who have been behind the scenes furiously typing answers to many questions, and Kathy and Rosie, thank you so much for all your help. Lots of different shared learnings. I think clarity is still needed. It's clear, but hopefully together we can start working together. We want to be heard. We want to help, and I think there is a really bright future for farming. So hopefully this has given you a bit of a sense of opportunity and positivity. But please, go away, have conversations, keep talking, and looking forward to seeing you all soon. So thank you very much, guys, and we will share the recording once it's all done. Take care. Right.